And during this pandemic, which we kind of started to notice in March in Armenia, government decided to declare a state of emergency, so that a lot of workplaces are closing down, especially in service field, and then all the problems came out. Of course, we knew all the problems. We are always documenting the cases, but for example, a lot of LGBT people find out that they don't have contracts. They don't have work contracts with their employer. And when the government started to distribute some support to those who lost their job because of state of emergency, a lot of LGBT people were not among them to receive this state support because they didn't have contract, or if they had contract, the salary mentioned in it was like the minimum. For example, if they monthly receive, let's say, 400 USD, in contract it says 100. And the state support was based on their salaries. So all these problems came out, and we understood that of course, a lot of non-LGBT people also had similar problems, but why specifically it was LGBT related, as a lot of people are working in service, working as waiters in restaurants, in cafes, salesperson as in different shops. So that's why it was more specific for our community.
Of course. And how is your organization, Pink Armenia? What did you specifically do to help LGBT community during the coronavirus crisis?
Yeah, so it was something new for us, and we had to decide our actions quickly. In few days, we created a kind of guideline for us and different tools to assess the problem and to start emergency funding. We even didn't have some financial resources for it, but we quickly decided to cut some of our administrative costs and use that money for social support or emergency funding, like emergency support for LGBT community. So we created a questionnaire where people could fill in and apply, and based on that, our staff members were contacting them, assessing the problem, and then filling all the necessary documents. And quickly, in 1 or 2 days, we were providing support if the assessment shows that they really need, because sometimes people use the opportunity, probably they don't need that money, but they decide to try the mechanism if they can get some more support. But we were trying to be more careful. I don't know how we managed to do it properly, but at least we know that those who need it, we help them during that period. And another thing we found out during that process, for example, some people were requesting money for food. Then during the assessment, we found out that they live with their families, and while we were asking questions, for example, in your family, maybe someone is working and they can cover some costs during this period, so better to give that money to another person who doesn't have food at all.
Yes.
And they said, well, I need this money to buy food for my family. Only after that, they will stop beating me. And like, wow. So another problem came out, the problem of domestic violence. As they mentioned, because previously they worked, they were working in somewhere and bringing some money or food home. So father or someone in the family was not physically abusing them. But as soon as they lost their job and they don't have income, they became a victim of domestic abuse. And some cases we like with their, of course, involvement, we applied to police that there are some domestic violence cases, but in general, domestic violence issues raised in Armenia. Also, women's organizations declared that their hotline calls were, I don't know, 2-3 times more than ever, and they had a lot of cases during those 2-3 months, starting from middle of March till end of May. The same with LGBT people, because they were locked in a abusive family, and in most cases they don't have their privacy. They live, for example, in a smaller apartment with a lot of family members. They don't have their corner, and being 24 hours with the abuser, it was really problematic, and people were getting aggressive in this long lockdown.
Did you offer, were you able to manage to offer like shelter to those people who were abused?
We don't have that kind of shelter, a place where we could take them, but we found different options. For example, some of them managed to stay in hostel for some period until their workplace could start functioning and they could continue their job. Some others decided to find roommates and share an apartment together. In other cases where police was involved, so they removed the abuser from the family, and the abuser moved to a village or somewhere, living, for example, with grandparents and stay far away from. But it was not a permanent solution, and we were closely monitoring to make sure that other family members don't continue the violence. We found like different options to kind of protect them.
Yeah, that's really great. And the government support for people who lost their jobs that you were mentioning, who lost their income, was there any sort of like government support that you could like initiate, or in general, like how does it work with that aspect?
So the government announced several options of support based on their work contracts. Some people, of course, received that support, and while monitoring the process, we found out that some people who applied to us, they received funding, they received some financial support from government. Because it was more like general, it was not specific for any target. Just if you have contract, if you were fired from your job on March 1st, and all this kind of similar structure, nothing specific.
Yeah.